Hi everyone, this is the Ask Annie podcast, Horse Girl reviews on products you use. This episode is brought to you by Hamley's. Hamley's, America's oldest Western store since 1883, Hamley's has been known to deliver world-class saddles and quality handmade Western craftsmanship. You own a piece of the Old West when you buy a Hamley saddle, tack, chaps, or other Hamley articles. Visit the Hamley Western store at hamley.com or on Court in Maine in Pendleton, Oregon. Hamley's is now owned and operated by the Confederated Tribes of Umatilla Indian Reservation. Hamley's, the legend rides on.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Woodrow. Would you mind telling us a little bit about Hamley Western Store came about?
Sure. Hamley Western Store opened up officially 1905 and by the Hamley brothers, and they have a prior history. Their folks came over from England, and they were in the harness business. And of course, in the 1800s, everything was horsepower in those times. And then anyway, so they started out back east somewhere, I forget where. And the younger brothers decided they wanted to move out west, and they went out to South Dakota. They started there. It's a big farming area right on the Minnesota, North Dakota border. And then they moved further west into southern Washington, southeast Washington. And they opened up a shop there, and they survived the fire. The business burnt up in the late 1890s, and then they started again, and it finally burnt up again. And so it was in 1905 they moved to south here to Pendleton, and then they bought this corner right here, opened up their business here in the corner where we're presently located. And as like I said, they were into the harness business, because there was a lot of transportation by horses with wagons and like that. Even though back east it was a turn of the century, they had electricity and carts. They still were using horses. It's kind of a transition period. And then, but out here, the farmers were still using horses to pull combines and plow up the ground to plant their crops. So that was the main business. They had a small factory. They had about maybe 14, 15 individuals, leather workers. And these leather workers were doing all kinds of things downstairs there. And then as the more modern times were arriving into the 1920s and like that, farmers were buying tractors and they didn't need the horses for the farming as much. And then the wagons, the trains had made it out here, so they didn't need the stagecoaches that used a lot of team horses. So that part of the harness business was getting phased out real fast. But they still, in this area, we're in the middle of livestock country. So a lot of sheep herding, a lot of cattle business going around, and a lot of grazing areas. Not every piece of ground was good for farming. So we're kind of what they call the high plateau, or kind of a high desert area. And they were situated right next to our reservation. We have a Umatilla River flows through our reservation and flows right through town. So it's called a Umatilla Reservation. And then there's several reservations around here. And this is in this area, the Cayuse Indians, my tribe, I'm a Cayuse Indian, were noted for the abundant horses that they had. And they were one of the prime providers for the horse market, for pulling those wagons and still even past the 1900s, they were still using horses back on the East Coast, and they were using them for inner city carts and apple carts and small carriages and coal mines. They used the horses to go down underground. So there was still that type of a market here. So horses were still being moved out, and a big transition went into the saddle market and anything saddlery having to do with the saddle market, and starting late 1910 into the 20s, and then they started keeping track of their records of all the saddles they made, and they kind of took a spin off from Ford Motor Company where they had the assembly line, so they could make a saddle in 3 days here. But they, like I said, they had one guy. All he did was cut out pieces, and all another guy did. One guy, all he did was make the cinch parts. Another guy made harness. The head stalls and the reins for the bridle. And we had a guy out in the backyard. He made bits and spurs. And one guy would carve the leather, and another guy would put the leather on the saddle. And so, yeah, and the parts usually were already cut out and just stored. They had round skirts, square skirts, and different sizes of parts, main parts. So when it come time to build a specific saddle, that they didn't have to take all day long to cut parts out and stamp them and get them wet and wet them dry and all of that. All the things it takes to make a saddle. So that was, and then that kind of started to die out. And we were looking at the records, reviewing the documents that we have on the computer, and it was up until the mid 1930s, back going into the I think 1926 or somewhere about there, when they started keeping records. And there was already by then over 11,000 saddles they had made up to that point. So they were doing pretty good business. And then and that just transitioned as the use of the horse kind of diminished as far as livestock is concerned, and the ranching business kind of start changing and becoming more modernized and like that. So they didn't need that many horses. But then the rodeo business, the competition took off. So there was two saddles that came out of that. There's I don't know, all this, there's 50, 60 different types of saddle trees and different variations. But out of all those saddle trees, two styles came out that had been invented here at Hamley's. One was called a wade tree, and usually around the country it's called a slick fork. There's no swells on they don't bulge out from the side. And then there's one they call the Association, Hamley Association, and that's a result of the rodeo because in all the different rodeos, these cowboys would come with their own saddles, and they had real enormous giant swells that would hold them in on a bucking horse. And so they said, well, that's not fair to all the cowboys. So there was four rodeo companies, Pendleton, Walla Walla. Off the top of my head, I can't get the other two. Cheyenne Rodeo and Wyoming. I can't get that last one. Anyway, they got together and they voted, and then they asked Hamleys to develop a saddle. And we had a tree called a Llewellyn tree. And they had the big swell, but they were straight across. And so they modified it in several different sizes. And then everybody voted how big a cantle it should be, how big a swell. And they figured on a 12-inch swell that should hold a cowboy in. And then so Hamley's built for these four associations, they built three trees, a 13 and a 14 and a 15. And that's what the cowboys had to ride. And of course, cowboys are a lot skinnier than those days, not big like me. So if you came to ride in one of their rodeos, you had no choice but to ride in one of those saddles. So later on, they made this, and these cowboys start bringing their own. They'd come to Hamley's and they'd buy a saddle, and but they had to be association saddle if they were going to ride in one of these association rodeos. So that kind of became generic across the country. So there's been then they formed it into a roping saddle and all kinds of variations on it. The skirt, the change, they did all types of different carving and stamping and like that. So Hamley was synonymous with the Northwest type of trees and like that. So the trees variation, those two trees have kind of made it back, headed back east down towards Texas, and so you'll see a lot of variations on the Wade tree and on that association tree. But they were invented here at Hamley, so that's kind of our claim to fame, and as far as saddles are. And then, of course, it used to be called Hamley Saddlery, and we were noted for our saddles. And then anything that had to do with horses, chaps, breast collars, headstalls, bits, spurs, anything that had to do with getting on a horse and working livestock. And there became two different styles with the saddle, the exterior of the saddle. They start doing more carving. It used to be all stamping, and a stamp is just one set design, and they just whack that all over there, and they wouldn't do it any. And then they would do the carving, where they take a knife and they carve a floral design in it, and it takes a lot longer to make floral designs. They make put animals on there, and they start getting into the trophy business. And so there's Hamley's got some real exotic looking saddles that they made on those two saddle trees. So yeah, and that's kind of how their history. They went along, and boy, after a while, it just kind of died out for a while. Saddle making, they started making like golf club bags here, anything that had to do with leather belts and like that. And that phase kind of a business venture, you got to try everything to stay in business, and so that didn't work. So they always stuck with the saddlery equipment, and then they start getting into the clothing, and then hats and boots and like that, and added that into it. And that's kind of where we're at today. And then we've and it's gone through ownership. In October of '05, that's when Hamley's reopened again. So I got hired on as a saddle repairman. I worked with Monty Beckman. He's the one who hired me. And Parley Pierce was the boss at that time over the saddle shop. So it was a real education for me. All of these things that I've explained, I learned it in those time frame. Digging around in the basement, they've got stacks and stacks of old pictures and records, and just delving through those things, and then being a repairman, we got all these old saddles that would come in, and then so I'd look back and I'd look at the saddle number, and I had I'm a retired police officer, and I was a supervisor at several tribal police departments. And one of my jobs was to organize records, so I organized all the Hamley records here on the saddles by the year and by the numerical and by the alphabetical order. And then I would look up a number on a saddle that came in. I would see who made it. And then, so it just kind of gave me some information on these fellas and the technique they were using. The majority of the saddles that I worked on come from in the 40s and the 50s. People were bringing them in. And they all made, the saddle makers were putting these saddles together all different underneath. And the outside looks the same, but underneath, they'd have a different amount of leather, different amount of, some of them had an all leather ground seat. Some had the metal plate in it, but it was all high quality workmanship. The leather was shaved thin, and it'd have another layer on, and that would be shaved thin. I didn't understand why they had so many little, just shave it right, the edge right down to a feather to nothing. And then they'd cover it again and then develop the ground seat. So, and then that was kind of the forte of a Hamley saddle. And a lot of people didn't understand when they bought a Hamley saddle why it felt good when you sat in it. Just like you know how a bicycle feels. Sometimes you get a good bicycle seat, and sometimes the bicycle seats they don't fit you. So it's that. It's the shape of that kind of a little triangle there that you put into the saddle, and now you sweep out the seat and shave it and build that in there. So, boy, that would be. They all did it. They all did it a little bit differently, and then they would cover it up with a big old thick giant piece of leather, and they used pretty much Herman oak was the primary leather that they used for all their saddles, and we still do today. That's all we use, and it's a number one quality. Well, I think there's a couple other leather companies in the United States, and some of them when Herman oak is not available, we'll get one of those other guys to give us some American-made leather because of the tannage that tannage process that they use, veg tan. They don't use no chemicals and like that when they're tanning the leather. So you get a real good, thick, high quality. It's tanned all the way through. Because sometimes I remember I was buying some of that. I don't mean to make fun of any other these some leather coming out of Mexico, but I bought at a discount through one of our national leather stores, and in the middle of the leather had a little thin white line, and that's rawhide, and you can't have that when you're trying to cut through and you want to have a nice smooth cut, and all of a sudden you get to that, and then your knife takes off at a wrong angle and can get rugged. So yeah, you stick with the high quality stuff, and that lasts years. We got saddles here that there's been passed on to generations. People are bringing in saddles that belong to their grandfathers. And the saddle is like a car. You always got to change your tires and your battery. While a saddle, you always got to change your saddle strings and your sheepskin. And you take care of your saddle all the time. Keep changing the sheepskin and keep putting new strings on there. And then that's a sign of somebody taking good care of their saddle. So the saddle lasts longer, and the saddle strings will get rotten. Could be dangerous if it, tears or whatever. There's certain parts to a saddle that need constant change. Sometimes, like a sheepskin, you need to change every 10 years. Where if you're riding a horse, just in the summertime, or if it depends on your riding habits. That kind of varies. But we're really fortunate. Like I mentioned earlier, our reservation is real close by. We took part, our tribe took part in an auction that occurred in August of 2019 in Portland. And we were fortunate to put in the winning bid for Hamley's. And it's been profitable, except for the saddle shop. We're still working on it, still trying to find ways to, we still make saddles the old way, but we're trying to find ways to use some modern methods that we're not taking any shortcuts on quality. The quality is always going to be there. The handmade, how you put in that ground seat and everything, that's always going to be there. We're never going to change that. And that's the way it's always been. A lot of saddle makers, famous saddle makers around the country in the Northwest got their start here. We're really proud to be associated with them because they stop by and then they give us helpful hints and yeah, I did it this way and I did that way, and then little tricks of the trade. When you're making things handmade, and they all had their own. Every saddle maker has all his own tools, and then we're the same way. My son is a saddle maker here, and I made saddles for a while until I kind of got handicapped with my arthritis. It crippled up my wrist and my knuckles, so it's hard to do any real good carving. And I still do it, but it's not the quality it used to be. And I'll say it's not Hamley quality. We have some high standards when it comes to quality. We can do stamping and like that, do a basket stamp. But when it comes to floral, we're pretty choosy about what it looks like and what the finished product is going to be like. That's a long-winded
No, that was great. And you mentioned this a little bit, but why are such high quality standards important to Hamleys?
Sure. Other than the reputation that we developed, that been developed before we even purchased the place there. When Hamleys owned it, when the brothers owned it, and that was the one thing that they really emphasized was doing quality stuff, not taking any shortcuts, using the best leather, using the highest quality metal products. Getting a real good quality steel and like that, it's really hard to come by, and it's more expensive. And lately, some of it hasn't been available. So the ones that we use were coming out of Boise Foundry in Boise, Idaho, and they shut down in April. It's always a search, and you always want to look ahead and like that, and that quality of steel, stainless steel that comes out of China, it's not available now. We can get it, but we have to get it in a roundabout way. It comes through one goes to another country, then to another country, then to a vendor in the United States, then from the vendor, he'll announce that he's got some the rigging steel or the bits and real high quality steel and product that we can use for saddlery, and they'll make it available until he sells out. So it's kind of a iffy thing. You're always on a constant search for that because you want to maintain the quality. We can put some regular iron stuff in there that's cast iron or something, and it'll wear, it'll rust, it'll you don't want to damage injure the rider. The saddlery fails at some point of hidden defects and like that. So you want to and we kind of developed certain vendors that deliver us. They know what we're looking for, or what our past saddle makers, but they're really choosy guys, and I tease them a lot. I say, "Oh, you guys, bunch of prima donnas," But yeah, they go after that quality. They know what it takes to make a high quality product. It's not a factory saddle. Most factory saddles, they don't have the high quality materials that we use, and they use lesser quality. They take shortcuts, and in their products, like when you put the seat on a saddle, our saddle is just one whole great big giant piece. But you look at most of these factory saddles, they're two pieces of leather sewed together. And then after about a year, if you ride it in the rain, one side will stretch out on you, and oh man! So where you choose your leather off that side, the thickness, the quality, the suppleness, stretchability, if it come from the neck or come from the rear end of the cow or from the middle of the back, high up. So there's like about 4 different qualities of leather in one big giant piece, 24 square feet that you got to choose from. And it takes 2 sides of leather to make one saddle. So yeah, you got to really be careful. You got to be choosy where you cut the leather out from, and then how you lay it in. And you could ruin a piece of leather real. They're making a saddle horn. You got to use a certain type on the top, and then on the bottom, it's a different piece of leather from the same hide. And then all of a sudden you tear it loose. You got to start all over again. But you want to get it right, get it good, And so a lot of the customers, maybe they might not understand it, but I tell you, somebody that rides horses every week, moving livestock and checking cows and like that, he'll feel the difference, and he'll realize the difference 4 or 5 years from now. When he's still riding it, he's not changing saddles every 2-3 years. He's still got the same saddle. So yeah, that's so that all of that amounts to quality, and then we try to maintain that for even if the person doesn't understand why it's so expensive, and it's a $4,000 saddle, and what goes into making it, and what we price out, but later on they'll realize what kind of product that they purchased, in the long run.
Yeah, and just the longevity of the product in itself. What would you say you enjoy most about your role at Hamley Co?
I have a lot of my relatives out here on the reservation. They say, "Oh, you're supposed to be retired law enforcement. Why are you still working?" And geez, and I don't tell them that I can't believe it that I get paid to play with leather. I love leather. My dad used to. He was a horse buyer, and so we'd go out. He'd be looking on a special horse, and then he'd see a guy's saddle was torn or a harness was torn, and then I'd go get his little toolbox, and he'd repair it right there on the spot for these guys. And I kind of picked that up, and then he wouldn't charge them for that kind of stuff, but he'd get in good graces with a horse owner that he was trying to scheme around on. But then at the same time, my dad, he'd give a horse away to some kid, and some people would come and we're looking for a horse, and he'd make me go catch a horse, and then it'd give it to those people, take it to their house, and so make sure that everybody had a horse if they wanted one. So yeah, I grew up around those horses, and just being around horses and being around leather and doing things with the leather and helping people. A lot of people come in and they just need a little thing. They need a strap repaired, and it takes 10 minutes to do that. And it's just more or less visiting with them and BSing and telling them stories, and then getting to do that, work with leather. Like I said, I can't believe that you're paying me to do this. I'd have done it for nothing. Yeah, I'd have volunteered.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and what can a listener expect when they visit Hamley & Co. or use a Hamley product?
Well, purchasing, like I said, and I can only speak for the saddlery. And then anything that has to do with saddlery, they're going to get a high quality piece of leather that's been formed, that's been handmade. That if it's been stamped, it's going to be any of our bad stamping, bad carving gets rejected. We got a box with a whole bunch of mistakes in it, and so they're gonna get something that gonna look good on their feet, gonna look good on their chaps when they wear their chaps. They'll look fancy when they ride a horse, and the horse is gonna feel good when he sits on one of our saddles. And we have a guarantee, and if the saddle don't fit your horse, or if it causes a problem, bring it back. We'll take it back. It's not clear cut and dried, but there'll be exceptions. You always want to make sure that we're doing a good deal with that, because you always want to make sure the customer is satisfied with his saddle, or maybe you don't like his bit, or it hangs his horse, because not every horse is made exactly the same. Every back is just a little bit different. The back might be a little bit wider, or and we try to stick with a generic semi-quarter horse trees. They're kind of wide. Get them too wide, it's going to be like a mule saddle, and then it will be shifting sideways, up and down. So you want to get it to a certain width, and the majority of today's horses are quarter horses, so that it'll fit most of the quarter horse backs. Then all you need to do is put a blanket on. Start out maybe thick blankets in the morning, and as a horse, because a horse back will change by the middle of the day. You ride him all day, so you can take the extra saddle blankets off and get down to a thin saddle blanket, and then that way you don't get no sore spots on your horse. And if you're a good horseman and you're taking care of your horse, and that's got to be foremost in your mind. I hate to see guys abuse a horse and then blame the saddle for their own carelessness. You gotta. There's a whole gamut of being around horses, and not just only saddles, but understanding how you use a horse and all of that goes with it too. So my son and I, my son's a saddle maker, like I said, but we both work cattle, both work livestock out in the range, and we have horses, and so we know and understand uh, horses and working livestock and what it takes to ride up, and especially for our country, we're in the foothills of the mountains, and we had our cows up in the national parks, and we had a tribal herd at one time. You got to get out, you ride a horse out, get your fencing tools, and repair a fence in the bushes, and then so your cows don't get out into private property. And so it's a 24/7 job. They wake us up 3 o'clock in the morning and tell us our cows are out. Got to load up horses and go out there and push them back in. And so that's how it is. So we understand that, and then that goes over into when we're making a saddle, because we know what these guys are going to be doing. They're going to pay that much on a good livestock saddle, whether it's a swell fork or a slick fork. We know how they're going to use it, and we know we want their horse to be all right with it. So yeah, I want the customer to feel that way, that they're getting the best that we can offer. Like I said, we got our word out there. You don't like it, bring it back. We'll try to fix it, or if we can't fix it, well then sometimes they bring their horses right in the back behind the store, and we'll take that saddle out and we'll feel the back and see where, and then we'll say, all right, this is a little bit, maybe if we might have to order a different tree for that horse, and then we'll do that, and then get them a tree that. But then that's the bad part of it is that what are you going to do when that horse is 30 years old and he dies, and then what are you going to do with the saddle? You got to bury the saddle with the horse. But you got customer, you want to make sure he's doing good by his horse, and everything works out good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can tell that you really stand behind your product. So that's incredible. That was all the questions that I had today. Woodrow, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I'd like to add that, the history of Hamleys with our tribe. Of course, everybody knows that all the tribal nations across the country kind of got a bad hand when they dealt to them when their lands were taken away. And but there's been a lot of people that have treated us good too, and Hamleys was one of them. Those brothers, they would have a Hamley Christmas. They invite the tribal members here. Now I remember coming here in the 50s and in the early, 53, 54, and my grandmother should get her lease checks. They'd mail them right here to Hamleys, and then so what we used to do was she'd come here in the wintertime and in the summer and charge up clothes, because we needed clothes and like that. We'd charge up things that we needed, hats, boots for my uncles and my grandfather. And so we'd buy those kind of necessities. Of course, they were pretty cheap then. Then she'd get her lease check for her wheat check in the fall, right about Roundup time. So we'd come here around Roundup, and then she'd pay her bills, and then he'd cash the check right here, and he'd give her what and so that kind of, and he, not only us, but a lot of our tribal members were treated pretty good that way. We weren't singled out or separated from the bigger population around us. We were treated the same, and that was good, And so we've always had that type of relationship with this business. When the new owners opened up, I remember in 2005, the first thing they did was they wanted a tribal blessing. Yeah, we did that. We came in and we sang our tribal songs, and we blessed the facility and the new owners and wished them good luck, because we wanted to keep that relationship going with them. So I was real fortunate that we won the bid, because everybody locally was glad, because we want to keep the business local, because we know what goes in the product and everything, and these other guys that were bidding on it, billionaires out of Seattle or Northern California, they don't understand the product. They understand profit and loss, looking at a computer screen. They don't look at what we look at. So you gotta make sure you get the extra effort in there. So anyway, that's all I had. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Thank you for being on the podcast, Woodrow.
Thanks for tuning in. Learn more about the Ask Annie podcast by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest at Ask Annie Podcast. Have a suggestion for a product you'd like me to use in an upcoming episode? Email me at askanniepodcast@gmail.com or leave a comment on any of our social media pages. Find even more Ask Annie episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, and many more. The Ask Annie podcast is a production of the Equine Podcast Network, an entity of Equine Network, LLC.